the lymphatic system. You might remember this slide from previous lectures on the blood vessels. We've used it to talk about the arterial supply and the venous supply, and how the arterial supply feeds into the capillaries, which then feeds back into the venous system, and it comes back to the heart. There's this other vascular system that we didn't really mention on when we talked about this slide, and that's the lymphatic system. That's what we'll talk about now. The lymphatic system is similar to the circulatory system, but has some unique functions. The function of the lymphatic system, in the arterial and venous system, you have arteries carrying blood and fluid away from the heart into the tissues, and the capillaries and the venous supply brings the blood back to the heart. But it's not a 100% perfect system. There's some blood that leaks out into the tissues that does not get picked up by the veins and the venules. That's where the lymphatic system comes into place. The lymphatic system returns those fluids that are leaked from the capillaries back into the blood circulation. So the fluid that gets leaked into the tissues from the capillaries that doesn't get picked back up in the venules, that's fluid is called lymph, and that's what is picked up by the lymphatic system and then eventually taken back into the venous circulation. You see from this previous slide, the lymphatic system picks up fluid from the tissues, and it goes through the different lymphatic trunks, lymph nodes, and eventually it dumps it back into the large veins near the heart. Now, what happens if the lymphatic system doesn't work, or if the lymphatic system is affected by infection or occlusion? You have a condition called lymphedema, which you have an accumulation of fluid that leaked out from the arterial and the capillaries that didn't get picked back up, and it leads to an enlarged extremity, for example, like in this person with a lymphedema of the leg. So the purpose of the lymphatic system is to return fluids leaked from the capillaries back into the blood circulation, and to provide a structural basis for the immune system. Basically, a place for phagocytic cells and lymphocytes to go to remove germs and dead cells. Lymphatic system vessels. They flow only one way. They only flow toward the heart. There's not a two-way flow. It just flows from the tissues up toward the heart. And there's various lymphatic vessels. There's lymphatic capillaries, lymphatic collecting vessels, and lymphatic trunks and ducts. We'll take a look at each of these. Lymphatic capillaries are similar to blood capillaries, except they're more permeable. They're more permeable because they're used to take up proteins, cellular debris, pathogens, and cancer cells. So these are typically larger objects that get caught up in the lymphatic system than can be picked up by the regular capillaries. Endothelial cells overlap these lymphatic capillaries, and they form mini valves that ensure one-way flow of fluid. These mini valves, like in this situation here, fluid goes into the lymph capillary but does not allow it to come out the same way. There's a one-way stop valve. And pathogens travel through the body via the lymphatic system. There are lymphatic collecting vessels. These are vessels that collect the lymph and bring it up to the venous circulation. They're similar to veins, except they have thinner walls and they have more internal valves. The collecting vessels in the skin travel near the superficial veins, but the deep lymphatic vessels travel near arteries. They're found everywhere throughout wherever capillaries are present, except in bones, bone marrow, and the central nervous system. Pretty much everywhere else there's the lymphatic vessels. The lymphatic trunks are the largest collecting vessels. When they unite and form lymphatic trunks. There's several major lymphatic trunks. There's the jugular trunks. You see here's the left jugular trunk and the right jugular trunk. There's a subclavian trunk. There's one on the left and one on the right. Left and right subclavian trunk. There's a bronchomediastinal trunk. Bronchomediastinal trunk here. There's lumbar trunks. The right and the left lumbar trunk. Here's the left lumbar trunk down here. And the single intestinal trunk. That's this trunk down at the bottom. Is only a single intestinal trunk. Here's a picture of more detail showing the various trunks. You have the jugular trunks, the subclavian trunks, the bronchomediastinal trunk, the lumbar trunk. All those trunks are paired left and right, but the intestinal trunk is only a singular trunk. These trunks are, their purpose is to bring lymph fluid, from the tissues up towards the veins, and it eventually be dumped into the venous system. The trunks deliver lymph into one or two large ducts. So the ducts are the largest of the lymphatic vessels. There's the right lymphatic duct, which drains the right arm and the right side of the head and the thorax. And the thoracic duct drains the rest of the body. Here's a picture that shows the areas in light green are the areas that are drained by the right lymphatic trunk. And you see it's the right side of the face, the neck, the right shoulder, the right upper extremity, the right thoracic. But pretty much all the rest of the body, including both lower limbs, the left arm, the left shoulder, the left side of the face, is drained by the thoracic duct. Here's a more close-up of the thoracic duct, and then the right lymphatic duct here, which drains the right upper extremity, the right side of the face. Lymphocytes, as you might remember, we discussed lymphocytes when we talked about blood, form elements of blood. They're the main warriors of the immune system. They're made in the bone marrow, and they mature into one or two varieties. They either become T cells or B cells. T cells and B cells protect against antigens. Antigens are anything that promotes the body to produce an immune response, such as bacteria, bacteriotoxins, viruses, cancer cells, mismatched transfused red blood cells. Anything that can cause a antibody response is an antigen. Remember, antigen stands for antigen. It stands for antibody generating. T cells attack and destroy infected cells. B cells produce plasma cells which secrete antibodies. Antibodies then attach to the antigens on these foreign substances, which puts a mark on that foreign substance so that it is taken over by phagocytic cells. As the cartoon here kind of illustrates it, the B cell says, I attack invaders outside the cells. T cells I attack invaders inside the cells. So like for a virus, a T cell would be, the virus goes inside the cell, and so it would be invisible to the antibodies which attack the outside cell, but a T cell can attack the cell itself and therefore get rid of an intracellular pathogen. This is a microscopic picture of the inside of a lymph node. There's reticular fibers, macrophages here, lymphocytes, all the different components of the lymphatic system. Lymphoid tissue. That's a place where lymphocytes can proliferate, can be trained, and basically become the killing machines that they become. There are two main types of lymphoid tissue. There's diffuse lymphoid tissue and lymphoid follicles. Diffuse lymphoid tissue are loose arrangements of lymphoid tissue that's found virtually in every body organ. Lymphoid follicles or lymphoid nodules are solid spherical bodies that are tightly packed with lymphoid cells and reticular fibers. So lymphoid follicles, there's concentration of lymphoid tissue. There are primary and secondary lymphoid organs. Primary lymphoid organs are where the B cells and T cells mature. Now, B cells and T cells originate in the bone marrow, but the B cells mature in the bone marrow. They stay in the bone marrow and mature there. T cells go to the thymus and mature there. So the bone marrow and the thymus are the two primary lymphoid organs. Secondary lymphoid organs are anywhere where mature lymphocytes first encounter their antigen and are activated. So this is where the lymphocytes are born in the bone marrow. They either stay in the bone marrow or go to the thymus for maturation. Then when they're mature, they're ready for their first fight. They're ready to encounter their first antigen. And the place they encounter their antigens are in the secondary lymphoid organs. That could be a lymph node, could be in the spleen, could be the tonsils, could be the appendix, or in areas of the small intestine called the Peyer's patch. All these are areas where, like battlegrounds, where the lymphocytes can encounter their antigen and mount an immune response. This is a diagram of some of the lymphoid organs. There's the tonsils in the back of the throat, the thymus. This is where the T cells mature. The thymus is in the thoracic area. It's most active during the youth. As you get older, the thymus almost withers away and doesn't become as important. The spleen is a good place for lymphoid tissue to occur. Those Peyer's patches are just scattered throughout the small intestines. The appendix. The most important of the secondary lymphoid organs is the lymph node. It's the principal lymphoid organ of the body. They're embedded in connective tissue. They cluster around lymphatic vessels. They're near the body surface in the inguinal, axillary, and cervical regions of the body. The inguinal regions are the groin region. So these are common places to find lymph nodes. If you have an infection in the leg, that infection may drain up and you may have swollen lymph nodes. Or so in the inguinal region, you can have lymph nodes in the axillary region, which you see this common if somebody's had breast cancer and the cancer cells are in the nodes. So you can feel them in the axillary nodes. If you have infection or cancer in the arm, and that gets picked up by the lymphatic system, and the lymph nodes downstream from the arm would be in the axillary region, and you could feel the axillary lymph nodes could be swollen. You have lymph nodes in the cervical region. This is going to be swollen in cases where you have a sinusitis or sinus infection. You may often have a sinus infection or a sore throat and feel the nodes in your neck are swollen. Those are enlarged lymph nodes. As the body's fighting off infection, the lymph nodes become a battleground site where that infection is fought. Lymph nodes' function is to filter lymph. Macrophages are there to destroy the microorganisms and debris. The immune system is activated. Macrophages phagocytize. B lymphocytes produce antibodies. T lymphocytes attack germs, cancer cells, and non-self invaders. Non-self invaders are invaders that are non-self. They're not from your own body. They're from external sources, like from a blood transfusion or from infection from a bacteria or a virus. The spleen is the largest lymphoid organ. It's served by the splenic artery and vein, which enter and exit the hilum of the spleen. It's a site of lymphocyte proliferation and immune surveillance and response. But one function that the spleen does is important. It cleanses the blood of old cells and platelets. Macrophages remove the debris. So it's like a kind of a garbage disposal area of the blood for dead blood cells go to die and are cleaned up by the spleen. This just shows anatomically where the spleen is located and what it looks like. You might remember this from the Human Torso Lab. Mucosa-associated lymphoid tissue, or MALT. There's lymphoid tissues located in mucous membranes throughout the body, in the respiratory tract, the urinary tract, the GI tract, and reproductive tracts. These are in areas where pathogens are likely to enter the body, like the respiratory tract that's open to the outside. That can be a source for infection entry into the body. The urinary tract, the GI tract, reproductive tracts are all areas where pathogens can enter into the body, and they're met by this force of this defensive force of lymphoid tissue called MALT. The tonsils, the Peyer's patch, and the appendix are examples of MALT. The tonsils form a ring of lymphatic tissue around the pharynx. So again, it acts as a protector to protect against pathogens entering the body through the nose and mouth. Peyer's patch are clusters of lymphoid follicles located in the walls of the distal portion of the small intestines. And the appendix destroys bacteria and prevents them from breaching the intestinal wall. It generates memory lymphocytes. Memory lymphocytes are lymphocytes that once they have encountered an antigen, they remember that antigen for the life of the patient, of the person, so that when that antigen is reintroduced at a later time, lymphocytes are ready to attack in full force. We'll cover more of this in the next chapter on the immune system, but this kind of introduces that concept. In the thymus. Thymus, we talked about, is more important early in life. It's found in the inferior neck, extends to the mediastinum, and partially overlies the heart. During childhood, it increases size and it's most active during childhood. It stops growing during adolescence and eventually atrophies. So the thymus does not play an important part in the adult. It's more important in the childhood stage and into the puberty and adolescence. It is not directly a fight antigen, rather it's a maturation site for the T lymphocyte precursors. Remember, that's where the T site gets its name T for thymus. It goes to thymus for maturation. And that's the end of this lecture.